Hello, my friend. Here I am again, speaking this time about Descartes' view of evil. Now, you got to bear in mind that René Descartes, who is often considered to be the father of modern philosophy, was actually writing, being squeezed between two perspectives. One, aiming to be scientific and rational. Two, aiming to stay within Christianity. So there is a real push between those two sides of the equation. And when he speaks about the problem of evil, that becomes very obvious. He says the problem of evil is really just a problem of error, of irrationality, of making mistakes, of not seeing things clearly. From his rationalist perspective, the challenge is one of logic, and the question that comes forward as always, therefore, is: if God is all-powerful and perfectly good, how is it possible for me to make mistakes or commit moral wrongs? How is it possible for a person to be evil? He addresses this question in his meditations, and especially in his fourth meditation, where he comes to the conclusion, where he argues rather, that evil arises from the interaction between two parts of the human mind. We're going in a sort of Freudian direction here also. One is the intellect, which allows us to understand things. This is our power to work with ideas. But this is finite. We don't know everything. It's always limited, And on the other hand, there is the will, which is how we make choices and decisions. This is our power to affirm or deny things. Now, he believed that the will is actually infinite, because it is the one thing in us that is completely aligned with God's own will. So evil occurs when we extend our infinite will to judge things that our finite intellect does not clearly and distinctly understand yet. It's like an overreaching, an overcomplication of things. It's like making decisions about things we're not ready to know about, and that's where the error comes in. It's basically not for us to make those decisions, he concludes. So, in line with Saint Augustine, Descartes denies that evil is actually a thing created by God. It cannot possibly be a thing created by God because God is almighty, is omniscient, omnipresent, and is infinitely good. So evil, therefore, is not a real quality. It is the lack of something. So here we see Platonic and Socratic and also Aristotelian ideas coming in. It's a lack of something, a lack of perfection that we're not quite ready for. He speaks about the craft of figuring out what is right and wrong. When a mechanic does something wrong with a car or something like that, he isn't creating a defect. He is building a machine that is limited in its own ways, and his skills are limited too, and so things sometimes go wrong. So this is what happens to human beings when they're evil. It is them not being up to the job yet, but it's nothing to do with God, because God, says Descartes, is not responsible for our errors, because he gave us a perfect will. We are responsible because we have this will, and we are godlike in that way, but we can only use our will properly if we are using it for things that we already understand, so for which we have also used our intellect to clarify whether our will should be used in that way. So it is as if God has given us this very difficult task to exercise our will in line with God's will, but to do so from our own responsibility and from our own rational thinking about the issues. So there are lots of flaws in what we do, but those flaws are part of our learning. This is the value of freedom, according to Descartes. It's better to have this free, infinite will, even if we're going to be sure to mess up, which of course you and I will always do. It's much better to have that than to be a determined being who can only do one thing and therefore is always right but hasn't had a choice, so isn't a godlike creature. Our ability to err is actually a side effect of the most important gift we've been given, which is our freedom and our capacity to exercise our responsibility. Now Descartes, whilst speaking about moral evil, came to wonder whether perhaps we should imagine that alongside God there is actually also a malin génie in French. I love to say that in French, le malin génie, translated as an evil genius in the universe. And this is probably Descartes' main contribution to the debate. This is in his first meditation, where he imagines a supremely powerful and clever being who spends all his energy deceiving us. So this is methodological evil, constant evil, systematic evil, a tool used to strip away everything that is wrong. That is what he concludes that would be for. If there is such a evil genius, it has a role to play in making us use our intellect and our freedom to understand and check whether things are right or wrong. And this is how he actually comes to formulating his cogito ergo sum, because in the process of using your capacity for thought, you realize that there can be no power like this, no evil power, and you also come to realize that it isn't right to do evil, and that you need to use your freedom and your intellect, and that as long as you have that intellect, you know you exist, and as you exist, it becomes important to exercise your freedom. So, for Descartes, to avoid error and moral failing, you have to withhold your judgment on what you're going to want to do until your intellect, your reason, has a clear and distinct perception of the truth and you have worked it out. If you haven't yet worked it out, you don't know what you're choosing, then don't use your will, because if you don't see it clearly, don't choose it, says Descartes. Wise advice indeed.